Sup, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the Stewart Podcast. Today, we have somebody that I only met just a few weeks ago in Costa Rica, and we're going to have maybe a couple stories from Costa Rica, but really get into what Savej, aka Donnie, is really all about. He's a shamanic electronic music producer born and raised in the swamps of Louisiana. I actually first heard of him through it was a friend of mine who runs his own podcast, and I've done some work with him actually on the Aubrey Marcus Awake in the Darkness film. He sent me a podcast with him, and the very first thing I ever heard Savej say was that humans are a time-space coordinate, and he was really laying down some knowledge that I didn't even know how to tap into at the time. Luckily, I got to meet him and go a little bit deeper. His music utilizes a combination of world instruments, sounds of nature, and shamanic ceremonial influences with tribal rhythms and bass, weaving together modern and ancient cultures into one universal, organic, ancient future sound. Donnie considers himself a student of the cosmos and the wisdom held by ancient cultures, deeply studying a variety of topics ranging from quantum physics to mysticism, and is passionate about connecting the dots and finding parallels between often and seemingly irrelevant fields. The only personal thing I'll share with you in the intro was I had the privilege of recording some Icaros from, it was a Quechua shaman that we had both done some medicine with down in Costa Rica just a few weeks ago. This was an incredible experience, and I hope that turns into some music. And with that being said, let's just get Donnie straight in here on the Ben Stewart Podcast.
Yo, yo.
Here we are.
Oh, we are.
What is going on, Donnie?
What's up, man? Glad to be here. Glad to see you. Glad to sit down and chat again, man. We just got back from an absolutely epic week in Costa. Really, really amazing experiences. And yeah, like you were saying, I'm extremely stoked that Maestro Orlando allowed us to jump in his room together, filmed a bit, and I got to record some of his amazing Icaros, and I'm really looking forward to making some music out of them.
That's right, man. So, I mean, with something like that, I know that the audience isn't privy to exactly what we recorded, but if the audience knows anything about Icaros or ayahuasca music, it's fairly simple and straightforward. Sometimes just whistling, sometimes just the voice singing in this other language, which has this really beautiful rhythmic pattern. But how long does that take you? If you were to take that and turn that into a song, how long would something like that take you? And what do you do to kind of sit with it so you can honor the, I guess the energetics of what was put across?
Yeah, honestly, I mean, each project takes a different amount of time from beginning to completion, but especially with projects of this kind of nature, because like I hold Icaros like so close to my heart, and they really are like magical melodies, and I always want to kind of capture the essence of what it is to be sitting in ceremony and be hearing these Icaros in a track, because it won't be my first time producing music with Icaros in it, obviously, for anyone who's heard my music, but I really like to capture the essence of the ceremony in such a way that the final product is both appropriate for listening to during ceremony or on a dance floor. So it's kind of like this fine line that I walk where, there's enough rhythm and bass, but there's also not too much going on to where it kind of has a ceremonial vibe. But for me personally, my process includes entering into medicine space on the first night of production and really just stepping into a flow state and really allowing myself to step out of the way consciously and just allow just creativity to flow through and kind of build the main idea or spark of what the record will be, and kind of start putting all the ingredients into play and whatnot, everything else that'll go into it. And then, I'm typically tapping into that kind of right brain energy that for that whole studio session, and not allowing myself to feel like I'm on a computer or interacting with technology. I just really use my gear as it's kind of ingrained in my brain. And then I'll follow it up in the coming weeks with all of that kind of like logical arrangement, polishing, all that kind of stuff. So the whole process kind of mirrors the process of like taking psychedelics and entering that medicine space and then integrating it in the weeks following. You know, the first part of that process being like pure flow and tapping in, and the rest of it being like applying logic to what came through during those moments of being tapped in.
For real. You know, when you're tapping into the medicine space, as you're saying, does it ever or has it ever felt foreign or alien to you to be in that space, but also be operating on technology?
Yes and no. It really depends on how well you know your gear and how efficient you. As a filmographer, I'm sure you're familiar with like how unbelievably important it is to both know your gear and to have developed a specifically tuned into you workflow that's efficient. So like when I you know, like I mean I've been doing this for a long time, and as that time goes on, my workflow gets better and better. I discover new time-saving tricks and whatnot, and really, it isn't even so much about saving time as it is, excuse me, about allowing myself to like remain in flow state. Because if I feel like I'm like clicking around on a keyboard or a mouse and I'm like just staring just at a computer screen, that's like the antithesis of a flow state to me. So I have some really amazing gear that I can really control my computer and programs with the gear physically to where I'm interacting with it on that type of level to where I don't feel like I'm on a computer. And that's really like the number one game changer for me.
Yeah. So when you're like, I wanna understand a little bit better, because having listened to your music, and I listened to it, it was Matt Zian. I was trying to think of the name during the
Oh yeah.
intro, but Matt Zian was the one who originally turned me on to your music by first introducing me to a podcast. Were you on his podcast? Or was
Yeah, yeah. I've actually been on there twice.
Okay, cool. I can't remember if it was your podcast on or his podcast that he sent to me, but it was a pretty incredible one. And then I started listening to your music, and I was just like, well, this is definitely like right up my alley. What would you say is the main thing that brought you to, and how would you title your style of music, and what was it that helped you kind of land on that really cutting edge? Because to me, I feel it's the real cutting edge between taking from the old world and honoring it, as well as walking the new world and honoring it, not getting lost in one or the other.
Right. First of all, thank you, because that's the exact intention that I'm trying to curate here and the vibe. And that's why exactly what you just said at the end there is why the best terminology that I've been able to conjure thus far is ancient future, because I feel like that's probably the best way to describe this type of music. Otherwise, I don't really know how to box it into genres that people are familiar with, other than just saying, you know, yeah, there's a bunch of organic instruments and flutes and handpans, but then there's like an 808 and then kind of like a hip hop vibe sometimes, and then like really shamanic too. And you know, ancient future just summarizes it best, I think.
That's cool. And you know, like the last thing I'll say, just kind of hanging on this topic, is a lot of where hip hop comes from really does come from their indigenous roots to begin with. There's some kind of like soul that you feel, you know, as you listen to those kinds of rhythms. And I'm feeling, you know, I'm feeling the same thing even in those aspects of your the rhythms that I've heard you include. Because a lot of times, like, you know, with Icaros, I know that, you know, for the Shipibos at least, they would use those palm fronds or the rattles, and that would be the closest thing to like rhythm that I would hear in there. It's just this but to actually have those like those lows and the pristine ability to use a kind of drum mix. I know that I was telling you I got Ableton over here, and I also use Native Instruments with Pro Tools and everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I've found that they have some really good ethnic instruments, some tablas and stuff like that, and really allowed me to start blending the lines between some of these world instruments and then more electronic sounds. So you definitely do have this kind of like ancient future side of it. Where do you see that kind of like, I mean, not in a physical where, but kind of like, where do you see it kind of like linking up with people when you see them dancing to it live or moving to it live? Like, I kind of want to say where, because you can kind of tell like with hip hop where in the body it's moving them, or like even in classical music you can see where it's moving them. To me, I would just imagine, because I haven't seen people dance to your stuff, but I've danced to it, and it takes different forms. It's almost psychedelic in and of itself, because there are times where I'm really kind of lost in maybe the hip hop side of it, or the dancey side of it, and then there's other times, even though those elements are still there, that I feel like maybe something else kind of took over, and there's just this kind of like evolution as to where in me it's hitting me. Does that resonate with you at all? And like, do you like, as you're making some of this music, do you approach it in a way that like, I want to move people this way, or do you not even bring the intellect into it like that?
100%, and it naturally unfolds that way. And that's what I was saying. Like, I like to tap into medicine space, and what medicine space is to me very often is a conscious bridging of your conscious mind and your subconscious mind. And so when I allow Donnie to step out of the way, let this bridge happen, and just act somewhat as like a medium for this creative force of the universe to just kind of express itself through me, which it's able to do because I've developed an adequate skill set of knowing what I'm doing and music theory and all that jazz. But when I can step out of the way and let my subconscious kind of flow through into the music and transcribe itself in that fashion, I think that's what's translated on the dance floors and when people listen to my music. And I think that's what you're alluding to, is that it really, like, because what's coming through is being kind of channeled through the distortion that is Donnie, like through my own predispositions, through all of my passive research and whatnot. My intention is to somehow, because a lot of the topics that I get into are really ineffable at the ultimate scale. Like, we can only talk about them so much, and then understanding dissolves and mystery takes over again. So like, my intention is to kind of transmit these concepts that I'm so passionate about, all of these different like kind of passive study of mine, into this like decoration of time, into this audio journey that transmits that hologram of gnosis and mystery to other people in its original condition, and just like without distorting it. So and I think that that's what's heard and felt, and it makes me feel so good. It's been like just a crazy blessing. And I guess that's what you were talking about in the way that it moves people and whatnot. I think that because that's the process of the creation of the music, that it might easily be causing that same conscious subconscious bridge in people who are listening. And that's why you would assume it to be almost a psychedelic experience, like you said, because when you're bridging those kind of passive thought through the veil of your conscious and subconscious minds, you're interfacing directly with your nervous system. And it also causes this like grand remembrance of like who you are, what you are, where you came from, where you're going, those types of things. And so like, that's why music's so special, because without the medicine assistance or without, anything exogenous, truly, like, it can catalyze these experiences within people, especially when it's like a full sonic experience with a large sound system and heavy bass and whatnot. It's magic, man.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's just as, actually far more profound around others who are enjoying it, feeling it at the same time.
Yeah, music, especially electronic music, like, tends to be that way, because there's this collective experience that's happening, and nobody needs words. Everyone's just tapped into this same frequencies, to this same overall vibe that's being curated. and just this same remembrance that life is dope. This version of the Matrix is dope, even though all, there's there's all kind of shit going on, all kind of shadow stuff happening in the world at all times. Like, it's really a matter of perspective, and like it really puts you into that right here, right now moment that's otherwise very often difficult to tap into.
Yeah, it definitely is. I want to know a little bit of like how and why you chose this path. Then I know we talked a little bit about it in Costa Rica, what you were doing right before this. We kind of shared some of our personal stories as to like why the transition was meaningful for you, but maybe help us understand why this specifically, this kind of like medicine music, but done in a an ancient future type of way, was truly meaningful for you, and kind of where you were just before this, and why this transition was so meaningful.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'll start on kind of why I do this. First of all, the name Savej, spelled like that, Savej, is actually a Hindu name, Savej, and it means bridge. And that's what I want my music to function as, is a bridge between Western world and like the different cultures who are bringing us these medicines, whatever you want to call them, the shamanic cultures, the ancient cultures, whatever. Because like the wisdom held within these cultures and within these things that are generally separated by cultural barriers and barriers of time is like paramount, in my opinion, to understanding how to navigate these times in the world, understanding how to navigate the experience of individuality, the experience of being emanated into this individual form and partaking in this human experience. And like, I just honestly, like, the music that I create really is just like a transcription of my soul's like truest expression. And that was my first why, I guess, was to really feel like I could really express myself, and this was the way that I've always known how to do it. And so I developed and fine-tuned this vibe, and when I released my Solstice album, which I was releasing music prior to that, but this was the one that I really felt like was like my soul's truest expression. It was so, I put it out there because there was nothing out there like it. I put it out there really not expecting much, and that was like not what happened. Like it was so well received and has changed my life immensely. It's connected me with everybody. I mean, it's why you and I are sitting here on this stream right now. And but I do it because I feel innately that it needs to be done, and whether that's part of my own self-expression and that's why it needs to be done, or whether it needs to be done as part of this service to the collective because it can help other people on their journeys of expression or their journeys of unraveling the mysteries of the cosmos or whatever, or their journeys in medicine space, which it facilitates for a lot of people. It doesn't really matter, but I do it because I feel this itch to just do this, and I love doing it. I guess that's the best I can say about it.
Yeah. Do you work with any kinds of frequencies? Anything special along those lines? And before you answer that, like, not just frequencies like the solfeggio and like the 432, 528 and stuff like that, but I know that I know you have like a deep understanding of mysticism. And I know that seems to be in every single conversation that we've had, but I acknowledge in you that it's not just something you researched. It's definitely something that you live on a daily. And are there deeper, I guess, like maybe arcane aspects of the music that you put together that you don't even put into words, that you don't like highlight or promote, saying this music is imbued with blah blah blah, but like I feel like there's layers upon layers that we could probably talk about, and even if we were to spend a whole show on it, there's probably more beneath the surface. Is that true?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
Anything like, you know, about, and it could just be surface level, but just so people understand the level of nuance that you go to. It's evident to me in the music just by listening to it. And we have somebody in the chat here, just to put this out here. Kat Caro said, I have reached flow state on the dance floor dancing to his music. It allows me to tap into a primal and aligned state with my body that is so healing. And so, you know, to me, that can happen for sure, with maybe just some, you know, some average, you know, musicians putting some music together, if somebody is really just looking to have that experience. But I have a feeling that's not what she's alluding to, that there's something deeper in your music that has these intentions in there.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you're correct. There are multiple layers of things that I do and background stuff that I do and overall tuning of the music. Like, for example, I'm sure many people here are familiar with the whole debate about tuning your music to 432 hertz, which means A equals 432 hertz, which then denotes the exact frequency of all of the other notes in the scale. For a long time, because there was really no additional context to that claim. It was thought of to be as like it's a bunch of shit. Mm-hmm. And like I was recently saying on another podcast, like I myself am like really a skeptical person, and I'm like absolutely allergic to woo-woo shit. So before I kind of apply something like that, I really do diligent research. And because I kept finding that to be such a constant claim amongst different cultures of tuning your instruments to A equals 432 hertz, I did a deep dive, like hardcore, into why that could be. And what I found, in short, because it's really, it would take me an hour to go, I could go on a whole tangent, but in short, that number in and of itself is resonant with the passage of time as Earth's rotation. So all the way at all scales of time, including the precession of the equinox, which is the great year, which is all 12 ages of the zodiac, which is actually a very long and slow wobble on the Earth's axis that completes every 25,920 years, which is 12 ages of 2,160 years each. And 432 is divisible by all of these numbers and is directly in resonance. I have this drawn out in my notebook as multiple sine waves that fit within inside of each other. And that frequency is directly resonant with the passage of time as we know it on Earth. So the rotation of Earth and at the same time, that wobble on Earth's axis that we call the precession of the zodiac or the precession of the equinox. And 440 hertz does not follow those patterns. It's not resonant with it. So it's a very minute difference, but just as the claims say that it's more in resonance with Earth and and you know, all of these things that can sound really woo-woo without the additional context, I believe that it's absolutely true. And that number is also incredibly special for other ways. Like if you take the base perimeter of the Great Pyramid at Giza and multiply it using any unit of measurement, and you multiply it by 43,200, you get the equatorial perimeter of the Earth. If you take from the base to where the top of the capstone was of the Great Pyramid at Giza in any unit of measurement, and you multiply that by 43,200, you get the polar radius of the Earth in that unit of measurement. So the pyramid is built to this same ratio. And follows kind of these same resonant patterns. So, like I said, that's kind of one of the layers. So I tune my music to A equals 432 hertz, and you know, like what you and other people describe of these feelings of certain nuances within my music and stuff, I absolutely attribute it to that being a part of it.
So when you and I don't want to hover too long on this, and this might even be too technical of a question, but how exactly do you tune your instruments to 432? Like, you know, so I see some of what you have behind you, but is all the stuff you use capable of being tuned in that way?
No, most of it is. Some of it is not. So I said when possible, I do that. But like synthesizers have a master tuning section in the master settings. I have 432 hertz instruments, like 432 hertz flutes called Earth Tone, made by High Spirit Flutes, amazing flute producer. And you can tune stringed instruments to A equals 432 very easily. You just set the master tuning of the tuner. But there are certain times I use other instruments that are like sample library based, like within Native Instruments stuff that I can't retune exactly, but there are always ways to try to approach it. So I do that.
Nice. Yeah. No, I was just asking because of the same thing. I use Native Instruments, and there's certain things that like I can't get exact. I can detune on my own, but sometimes it's really just it's hit or miss.
Yeah, that's not the same. Detuning is not the same because it's about the ratio.
Yeah.
So like if you tried to like detune 8 hertz, which is a logic that a lot of people think is applicable, but it's not, is, because you're detuning 8 hertz, but that A equals 432 is really, that's just a short way of saying A equals 432, B equals this, C equals this, D equals that. It's a ratio of relative frequencies.
Yeah.
So yeah, like if you can't change the master tuning, it's very difficult to approach. You'd have to retune every note in a melody.
That's interesting. So, like music being like such a huge part of your, repertoire and what you've got going on right now. I want to maybe put that to the side just for a second and explore a little bit more some of the, not just plant medicines, but I want to definitely get into psychedelia a little bit with you, because I think it was actually in the Maloka. Yeah, there was this one time in the Maloka where you were turning me on to some of the other things that you've played around with, and those would be the Harmala, Harmaline, and what was the other one in Tetra? Is that the other one?
There's 3 of them. So it's Harmaline, Harmine, and Tetrahydroharmine.
Yeah, Tetrahydroharmine. Mm-hmm. So, and then you were playing with the ratios of those, just so everybody knows. These would be the 3 alkaloids inside the ayahuasca vine, the MAOIs, that allow for safe passage of the DMT past the liver, so it could have its time to get past the blood-brain barrier. I won't even pretend like I know as much about this shit as you do. The way that you were explaining it to me, the way that you have isolated some of these out and experimented with each one individually with DMT as well, and had come back with a different experience as well as different visuals. I'd love to tap into that a little bit. So if you don't mind, like just telling me, for one, like how exactly you ended up going about isolating some of these alkaloids, and what your experiences were, and what you were able to kind of glean from why each experience was different.
Yeah. First, you can acid base extract Syrian rue seeds or ayahuasca vine. It's a fairly straightforward extraction for which there are texts all over the internet on like DMT Nexus and Arrowhead and stuff like that. And it's not illegal in most states either. So but yeah, there's a method also called the Mansk method that uses salt and whatnot. And so you can end up with essentially freebase material or hydrochloride material, hydrochloric salt, which is water soluble. But yeah, so essentially there are 2 majorly known and most widely used plant-based MAOIs, and those are going to be Syrian rue, which is native to the other side of the globe, and ayahuasca vine, which is here. So there are 3 major Harmala compounds, and those are Harmaline, which is most prevalent in Syrian rue, Harmine, which is most prevalent in the ayahuasca vine, and Tetrahydroharmine, which is generally only present in the ayahuasca vine in small amounts. So those are the 2 kind of different spirits of those 2 plants when you're using them as an MAOI. The ayahuasca vine is very high in Harmine and Tetrahydroharmine, and Syrian rue is very high in Harmaline, and these compounds have different effects. Harmaline is much more physical and like stony and will couch lock you, and harmine is more stimulating, and tetrahydroharmine is actually a serotonin reuptake inhibitor. So it keeps more of the serotonin in the synapse and can actually contribute to those like blissful kinds of experiences. But yeah, so a lot of people are under the impression that MAOIs and Harmalas only, their only job is to turn off an enzyme in your gut. But that's not true. The monoamine oxidase enzyme, of which there are two kinds, MAOA and MAOB, is actually present in all of the tissue in your body, especially brain tissue. So it's not just inhibiting the enzyme in your gut, it's inhibiting that enzyme in your brain as well, which is going to drastically slow the metabolism of any tryptamine, especially in the case of ayahuasca, pharmawaska, anahuasca, that you're talking about DMT. But these compounds also inhibit the metabolism of psilocybin and other tryptamines. So, it's really a magical thing to be able to play with, because the different and look, I don't want to take away from what we get when we consume like the actual plant materials and the hundreds of compounds that are in there that contribute to what we call the entourage effect and the overall plant spirit, like the neurochemical interfacing pattern of compounds that allow our consciousness to interface with these plants. But in truth, in my experience, is that these kind of channels of consciousness can be tapped into utilizing different ratios of the Harmala compounds. So in my experience, using a blend of harmine and tetrahydroharmine puts me into that mother ayahuasca vibe. Using a blend high in harmaline puts me into more like African Egyptian kind of experiences. And this has been consistent and reliable in my experimentation.
You had mentioned, I would love for you to explain Vaporwaska, because that was as much as I'd heard of many different, there's, I forget, Asiwaska was the first time that I had actually heard of analogs being made, and that's obviously from Australia. But when you said Vaporwaska, it made total sense, but I hadn't thought of actually mixing the inhalable form of DMT with maybe an ingestible MAOI. So which one, like how did you happen upon that? Did you just like figure it must work like that, and then you tried it? Had you heard anybody else doing that before you?
Yeah, I honestly don't remember. We're talking like 10 years ago. I'm not sure. The DMT Nexus is an amazing resource for stuff like this. I've learned a lot on there. I'm not sure who put me onto this, or if I just kind of did it and realized how well it works, but I do remember doing it sublingually first, like putting Harmalas under my tongue and then smoking DMT about 30 minutes after, and that worked. But it was a game changer when I just take it orally, wait like a full hour and a half, and then smoke the DMT, and that can be controlled as a ratio of how much Harmalas, how much time passes, what type of Harmala, and how much DMT. Those are your variables essentially. And obviously you have to vaporize DMT properly as well, and like really take care to not burn it and whatnot, because when you burn it, it chemically changes and often causes a pretty rough experience. But like I've found, like actually just in the last year, that the best way to smoke DMT, first of all, is through a volcano with a concentrate pad on it, because you can set it to 420 degrees Fahrenheit and just let it fill up a bag with perfectly vaporized DMT, and you're not dealing with the pipe and all that stuff. But anyway, so if you take the Harmala compounds and give it about an hour and a half, and you vaporize DMT, however you go about doing that, or you smoke changa, then what's happening is those compounds have inhibited the metabolism of DMT as a function of the dose of the Harmalas. So the more Harmalas you take, the slower the experience creeps on, and the slower everything happens. Instead of the 500 mile an hour experience of vaporizing pure DMT, things are slowed drastically depending on how many harmalas you take, like 50 miles an hour, more harmalas, 25 miles an hour. And on top of that, what seems to happen when you vaporize pure crystalline DMT is that it's just a remote control, and it changes the frequency and the channel of your consciousness, of your conscious awareness, and you land somewhere, right, random. And it's a much more cosmic, galactic kind of experience. But when you add the harmalas into the equation, they seem to take that remote and change your consciousness channel to channel Earth, and the experience is way more organic in nature. I very often have microbiological experiences of my genetic material and of like my cellular kind of scale of awareness, like literally like zooming into like my tissues and whatnot, and I have much more earthy visions and Egyptian if I'm high on like the Harmaline blend, or South American jungle, Aztec, Inca kind of vibes. If I've taken like a high harmine blend, which I find super interesting because those different compounds kind of put me in the cultural context vision space of where the plants originated from. So I think that's really cool, and it's been repeatable for me, which is like really interesting. But yeah, so it's just, those are the variables: is what type of harmala, how much you dose if you took it orally, how long you waited to vaporize the DMT, and then how much DMT you vaporize. That's the game. That's like the interplay of the infinite possibilities of experience that you've now opened up to when you combine the harmala compounds with DMT, which in nature they were meant to be married. Those compounds are designed to be combined. It is intelligent design beyond doubt that those two things exist in the way that they do in nature.
That's wild. So when you're saying it slows down the experience and makes it more kind of terrestrial, rather than the very just kind of blast you out of a rocket, of just regular smoking changa or something like that, without the harmala, harmaline, tetrahydroharmaline. My curiosity here is, when most people do DMT, it's so fast that they have an encounter, they have an experience, they have something, super wild to them, but it often doesn't take them on a journey where they feel like they are like, oh, that was super healing, or like that really got me in touch with something that I haven't, faced for a while. When you slow it down, when you say it's slowed down by taking those other alkaloids, would you say, as it's more of a terrestrial experience, it's kind of mixed with your own context as well, that it actually maybe surfaces some of the same stuff that ayahuasca would surface?
100%. Sorry if that wasn't clear, but yeah, like this is the way to take crystalline DMT and turn it into a healing agent, because most of the time it's not. It's just not. It's an exploratory thing. It's way too fast. You remember maybe 1% of it. You're conscious that you can't remember shit, and then it's just like, high and by. And because of the nature of the flash, it's very difficult to integrate. Like, what do I do with this? Okay, that was like fucking crazy, but what do I do with that? What did I learn about myself? What did I learn about the nature of reality? Like, whatever. And those experiences happen, but they're very inconsistent. They're unreliable. They're, often very difficult to repeat and difficult to integrate. So this is the way to slow that metabolism. And the reason why we call this Vaporwaska is because it takes DMT vaporized and essentially gives it the context of ayahuasca and the spirit of ayahuasca. The word spirit, and this is just, the framework of etymology here, I guess, but the definition of the word spirit is the most fundamental essence of something. And these harmalas are the most fundamental essence of all of these enzyme inhibiting plants that are claimed to be the ones with the spirit. Like in ayahuasca culture, ayahuasca vine with the harmalas in it, that's called the power, right? Like, and there are numerous cultures that their ayahuasca doesn't even contain any DMT. It just has these harmalas in it and the other, compounds in the plant, obviously. But the DMT is just referred to as the light that allows you to see what the power is doing. And so, like, it's really something special to be able to take that approach, because also each hit of DMT generally will last like 45 minutes instead of the 10 minutes. So like you can enter that space for 45 minutes, and for the people who, you know, aren't necessarily ready to make a commitment to ayahuasca and traveling and Maloka and all that stuff, you know, it's an option that's there. So, but yeah, it's really magical, man.
Amazing, amazing. You had mentioned when you were talking about this, getting down to the genetic material of your own body. And this is something we loosely talked about a little bit. Tell me some of just the conscious work you've done in that space. You don't have to get into too much personal context on like why you went into that, but I've often found that very interesting because, you know, having done ayahuasca since 2008, from the very first time, I felt that this was something that I was doing not just for me. And like if I was purging, it wasn't always just purging for me. And it wasn't always just like for people in the room either. I definitely felt like for my children, which I didn't have back then, you know, for my family and my ancestors, there was a lot of work being done. And I was coming to terms with things that I never experienced in my life that had very little to do with me other than the fact that I am the offspring of, you know, several generations behind me, and seeing their eyes and actually feeling some of what they kept secret and passed down without realizing it. When you say you get into that makeup, I would love to know, maybe just paint us a little picture of like what it is you're actually seeing and how the work is done as you're actually going into your own genetic material and in a sense tinkering around down at that scale.
Yeah. It's extraordinarily difficult to put into accurate terms, but I can do my best. The reason it's difficult as far as like how it's done is because it's like when I'm interfacing with this, it's a full mind, body, spirit, psychological process, and like the gap between my conscious and subconscious minds are dissolved, right? So, but this experience has been happening to me for a decade now. And I read after it started happening, I needed to understand, like, I needed to know that this was the foundation of shamanic work, and had been known that this was the case. And certainly enough, it was. There's a book called The Cosmic Serpent by Jeremy Narby that details great detail about this exact experience, about interfacing with your genetics under the influence of ayahuasca and tryptamines, and how this has been known in the shamanic cultures for tens of thousands of years, how they knew the double helical structure of DNA thousands of years ago, and how the symbol that we know, the catechus, where the two intertwining snakes that you see on ambulances and stuff, you know, how old that symbol is a representation of DNA. And but yeah, so, you know, I end up in this space, and generally I'll be kind of like zipping down one strand of genetic material, of DNA or RNA sometimes. DNA, yeah, that's the book right there. It's so good, dude. Please, everybody read that book. If what I'm saying is interesting at all, please read that book. And so, what I'll see sometimes on these strands is what I now know to be a ribosome, which is the kind of piece of molecular machinery that decodes RNA and translates it into amino acids, peptides, and ultimately proteins. And so, but what's important to understand is that two things. First of all, we have like a surplus of genes that are, some of them are conducive to producing healthy outcomes in our physical and mental well-beings. Others are conducive to producing disease within our physical and mental, you know, complex. And there are switches. There's a switchboard for turning on and off these health-producing / disease-producing genes. And that field of study, obviously, we know as epigenetics. And that's sometimes what I feel like I'm dealing with. Other times I feel like I'm dealing with the very specific resplicing of certain aspects of what I'm assuming is my non-coding DNA, what us fancy Americans always call junk DNA because people don't understand it. But it's about 98 point something percent of our genetic material does not code for proteins. It only takes that 1 point something extra percent to 3D print our full bodies, brains, eyeballs, everything. And we have all of this stuff in nature. Nature does not use excess for nothing, right? It utilizes everything. So I believe, and my perceived experience from the last 10 years of interfacing with this is that many of the stories, our ancestral traumas, our ancestral lineage, the distortions that those people carried with them in their mind, body, spirit complex, and any of the kind of overall linguistic architectures of the subconscious operating system of the person is contained within this non-coding genetic material. And these things are passed on to us, and they're also modulated by us unbeknownst to us through nurture versus nature, right? Like through our environment, or there are constantly genetic on and off switches being flipped through our experiences, through our emotional reactions to things, through our mental state, through our neurochemical balance. There's tons of variables that are consistently making genetic changes. And for a long time, DNA was thought to just be static. Like you're born with it. DNA was thought to just be what it is. That's it. Good luck. These are your cards. But that's not true at all. And we know that. And now I know, Jeremy Narby knows, he wrote that book, and a bunch of other people know who are having this experience, because it's not just me, that you can directly interface with it and use your intent and will confront the stories. You're essentially reading this material like a book, which, by the way, junk DNA, or the non-coding DNA, follows something called Zipf's law of language, ZIPF, named after the guy that discovered it. Zipf's law of language, which deals in the frequencies of the most occurring words of any language. And this is a constant in syntax across every known language. So the MIT actually did a study on this, and Zipf's law of language applies to this non-coding DNA to the T. So it is literally a syntactical expression akin to every known language that we know. It follows this same constant rule. And so what seems to be occurring is you're reading this material like a book, and you have the ability, through following the psychological processes that the story leads to or manifests as, and recognizing them within yourself, you have the ability to on the spot rewrite that story. And in my opinion, in my belief, this is a lot of the foundation of healing. And what is really wild about it to me is that the vision of this happening is very often what we call a multi-stable perception. If you could bring up the picture of, if you look up multi-stable perception, you'll see the example of the cube, and the cube is facing either this way or that way based on the perspective that you decide for it. I'll find that the visionary spaces of these genetic experiences are often, there's one. Yeah, so you can see that cube is different things based on the flipping of a switch in your head. And what I find about these genetic experiences sometimes is that they're projecting other visuals, like another, and when I switch my perspective, I see that it's my DNA. Exactly as these multi-stable images are. So I might be seeing a snake or a dragon or whatever, and then I flip and I see that it shouldn't. Now that doesn't take away from the actual visionary experience. That's not what I'm saying. Everything can be reduced. I'm saying that they're all interrelated, and with like the flip of a perspective switch, I can generally get past the curtain of my vision, peel back that layer, and see that I'm interfacing with my genetics. And what I find fascinating about that notion is that DNA actually releases light. It emits biophotons, we call them, and it emits this light in a coherent fashion. Like coherent light is similar to how a laser functions. It's not just sporadic; it's coherent and like organized by wavelength. And so the fact that DNA it emits light makes me wonder, and Jeremy talks about this in the Cosmic Serpent as well, if like some of these kind of projected holographic experiences are the witnessing of the light that is kind of decoding these stories within these non-coding regions of our genome. And does that make sense?
It does, dude. And like, I'm super glad you brought up Zipf's law. I've reported on that before, and I definitely feel that there's also a lot with even mantra and the use of mantra. So like these languages mixed with toning, which can create cymatics in the brain. But the next thing that I want to mention was the thing you were just talking about right now. What's that? No. Dang.
Photons, biophotons, junkie.
So you were just literally right before you asked if that makes sense.
Biophotons.
The biophotons. There we are.
Yeah.
So, so like I've looked a lot into that, and also the myofascial system in healthy tissue is fiber optic and can share biophotons throughout the body. So there's this university in Germany that just a couple months ago, maybe it was earlier this year, released a study that said experienced meditators with a heart-centered meditation exhibited an explosion of biophotons coming from the heart. Meaning, so like, and it's from a university in Germany that starts with like West something. But anyway, that shows that like where the attention goes, there's also biophotons. That biophotons are emitted in focal points if you're focusing on the heart in a meditation. Especially the experienced meditators found that it was an explosion of light coming from that spot right there.
Wow.
There's also there's something interesting about that I'm curious if you've heard about. Stewart Hamroff and Sir Roger Penrose, in their understanding of where consciousness arises from, not that it even matters, but they've been looking at microtubules inside the neurons, which are little tiny spindles of tubulin A and tubulin B. And they've noticed that when psychedelics are taken, the benzene rings stack, they bond with tubulin inside the neurons, and they send the microtubules into quantum coherence, which basically means that tubulin A and tubulin B, they will shift their configuration. So if which basically Gordo, means like that the one that's in blue, click on that one. They will shift their configuration. So if so you would say that the light blue is tubulin A and the purple is tubulin B. They switch configurations. It doesn't always look like one line of each. They'll switch configurations. And there's really, it almost seems chaotic and random. There's no telling why. They'll just very, very rapidly change their configurations. But on any kind of tryptamine, Stewart Hamroff and Sir Roger Penrose were showing that, and Deepak Chopra even went into this a little bit. I'm not sure what sense Deepak was making of it, but that the oscillations of tubulin A and tubulin B actually start picking up on wave fluctuations in the Planck scale. So there's something about that where even the microtubules are at least like receivers, transmitters of some kind of wave fluctuation that gets tuned into more on psychedelics. And the last thing that I'll say that I find is really interesting that I bet you would nerd out on is there's this woman, Selin Atasoy, and she's from Imperial College London. She did what's called brainwave connectome harmonics. And what that basically means is it's not like when you're experiencing theta in the brain that every part of your brain is pumping out theta waves. It's usually different regions of the brain that are oscillating at different cycles. And she found that what that means is that your brain operates more like a symphony than it does a calculator, for one, because it's always looking to come into resonance with itself. And then when she gave people LSD and was measuring the brainwave connectome harmonics, she found that the repertoire or the complexity of that symphony would expand, meaning there's likely far more access, which we could just surmise anyway, but far more access to whatever these brainwave states mean. And that's just LSD. It hasn't been looked at with other tryptamines so far. So like with those little key pieces, to me, I feel like there's some things linking up in my mind, having just listened to you with especially with the biophotons part right there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. 100%, man. Yeah. And like, I assume that the microtubules have something to do with the brain's ability under tryptamines to kind of bring its separate departments into a conference call. That's kind of like the analogy based on what we can see from psilocybin research now, is that different departments of the brain that tend to function kind of like a Fortune 500 company, like you got like your marketing here, your executive branch here, and like they don't really talk to each other. But like when you get everybody, or when you consume a tryptamine, it's kind of like everybody jumps on a conference call and everything interfaces in this giant web of connectivity that you can see in all of the brain scans of psilocybin participants, that like everything is talking to everything, and for whatever reason it's usually extraordinarily compartmentalized, and perhaps the attunement of the microtubules has something to do with allowing that kind of electrochemical reconfiguration to take place under the influence of these substances.
Yeah, I feel it intuitively when I do any tryptamines. I feel that conference call going on.
100%.
Neuroplasticity.
100%. That's yeah, exactly. And that's the basis of synesthesia. I mean, that's how you smell colors or have these like sensory mix-ups, because these usually highly compartmentalized and very filtered lobes of the brain are just like all just like having a pool party together, you know?
So, dude, I would love, and I'm wondering if you've thought about this, but like, you know, let's say if you had endless resources, and you were able to, you know, maybe even spearhead, maybe whether it's, you know, just you or you have the pick of the litter of like who you could bring together, what would be a large kind of event / ceremony? Like how would you orchestrate something if you could orchestrate something global and maybe put them on like one on every continent? You know, how would you set something like that up and help to bring some synchrony and coherence between all the people who are at least open and willing to be a party to what we could be, you know, a little bit collectively. Have you ever considered something like that?
I'm actually in the early stages of working towards something like that, so I'm not gonna say too many of the details. Okay. But yeah, man, like I think there's a new wave of potential for new types of conscious events that, you know, what I'm going to focus on is education first, like really profound frameworks that have really helped me to reconfigure my understanding and perceptions of reality in a way that I've found that develop me the most positive mental configuration and outlook. So, you know, coupled with other speakers and whatnot, people specialize in their fields, and then, you know, music, obviously, as a rebalance and as a way to move what we've discussed, all the discussions and shares that we've had through our nervous systems, and like really transmit gnosis into understanding and change things that you know into things that you understand. And you know, I think there's something really special brewing, and more of these types of events are popping up. I've been blessed to be able to play music at many of them over the last year, and some of them are very special. But yeah, I mean, as far as I'm equally passionate about learning about all this stuff that I've been discussing as I am about making music. So like I'm going to combine my brand with my music brand with that type of educational kind of platform.
Yeah,
Amazing.
Holistic.
Do you have anything? Do you have anything that you're working on now? Any new up and coming, like either products? I know you talked a little bit about courses, but you know, if you can't get too deep into what you're working on, let me know. But I'd love to know like what's next. I'm sure you're going to be making more music, I know that, but like with some of the education and stuff like that, is anything on the horizon that we can look forward to?
Yeah, I mean, one of the first things that we'll be putting together is like somewhat of a curriculum, nothing too like crazy fancy, but kind of breaking down in an easy to digest fashion the Law of One material, which everybody who has me on their podcast hears me ramble about, and I it absolutely fundamentally changed my life and the people I share it with. And like I said, generates a very positive mental framework and configuration of understanding everything that happens during the human experience, and of understanding the nature of the cosmos, and in understanding the microcosm of that exact system of patterns that exists within you. But the material is extraordinarily dense. I mean, it takes like a year to read through, and you have to take like avid notes. Things are way out of order. It's like really, really dense. So condensing it is invaluable, condensing it into concepts, and I've been able to just kind of like formulate my own articulations that I feel are very concise as to certain aspects of what the material is communicating. And anyway, it's just really important to me to share that framework. And I've learned, I kept it to myself for a long time. I discovered the Law of One in 2016, and I instantly realized that like this is one of those things that like people who are seeking it will find it, and it needs to stay like that. And I've begun to think that was a mistake on my part when I started sharing little snippets and realized just how many people like resonate with it, and like it really gave me the motivation to want to continue sharing it on a deeper level that's more organized and really breaks down like A to Z the concepts of creation, of logos, of our sun, of our existence, of the seven density system of understanding consciousness and understanding the dimensionalities of consciousness, and all of these things. So yeah,
it's fascinating.
That's something I'm working on. On top of that, I'm making a whole lot of music right now that's really honestly like also happening at the same time. So but yeah,
I was wondering when you were mentioning some of the words I was hearing with the mind, body, spirit complex, and I'm like, oh, that's Law of One. So it's interesting. Yeah. But I think that's a lot of what's happening now, is a lot of these ancient wisdoms, they're finding conduits and people to help make it more, whether it's more entertaining or palatable. I don't know. I think part of our role we're so unique at it as a species is we're just such great storytellers. And whether that's through music or around a fire or through cinema, we really, I think, have a unique ability to empathize and use our emotion to do story in such a unique way in the cosmos. So I don't know. I feel Ben talks about the artist revolution. I think that's a part of this huge revolution, is our storytelling is really going to become this tool that we wield in some new profound way.
Yeah, that's how we remember. I think a lot of what's happening right now, the reason why there's this a larger adoption for what is ancient, as well as how does it make sense now? How is it modern as well? I think it's intuitive for a lot of people because it feels like a fully aware human remembers their past, and they have a clear vision of their future, and they're deeply rooted in the now. And everything up until now has really, been this, as long as you have a purely intellectual understanding of the conventional histories that have been written down, I think people are starting to push, not even push back. They're starting to like wake up and acknowledge that what we're remembering, what happens as we awaken to who we are, is we can't be fooled by just conventional wisdom that's out there, which isn't even really wisdom in that respect.
Right.
And we're starting to ask questions, and I think this is why like a lot of the stories are out there, really pushing back against people, putting them in camps, making people feel really loony for ideas that nowadays they don't even seem that crazy anymore, and I'm not even, I'll just say the one that's obvious is like when History Channel started really taking off because of their one show, Ancient Aliens, and that it's not an underground idea anymore, that there may have been influence in the past, there may still be influence, and now that it's being taken so seriously in so many different lights, I think what we're dealing with is people are dealing with forgiving themselves for how deeply we believed in just the stories that were given to us, no matter how ridiculous they seem. We have to forgive ourselves for buying it so much, not just being sold. And that's what I like about what you're working on, Donnie, is, and all the conversations that we've had, is it feels like you're fully, boldly standing in these experiences that you have personally had. And if it resonates, it resonates because it resonates inside you, not because enough people around you telling you, oh, this is the way, Donnie.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and the reason for that really is because, like, over the last decade, through my experiences, I've come to really appreciate attempts at understanding the nature of belief itself, and the fact that objective reality might not even exist. The only thing that might exist from the field of potential that we're collapsing at all times is the meaning that we paint onto these things. Yeah. And so that meaning is painted on through belief and expectation. That's the paint, right? So it's the blessing and the curse of every human in existence is their belief system. So like being very wary about understanding that you're choosing to believe what you're choosing to believe, and that you can and will access changes in those templates of belief through time, especially if you delve into plant medicines. It will make you confront the nature of your belief and understanding that your perception creates your reality. So like really diving into the nature of belief is why the framework that I use to and like kind of describe, break down, and understand reality is entirely free of dogma. Not because dogma is not useful sometimes, but because I feel like collectively it's becoming less and less useful, and more people are more willing to digest the nature of reality as it is. Because when you digest it as it is and you take the dogma out, you can really start viewing things as a lens of self and understanding the nature of self, like I was talking about earlier, and the nature of partaking in individuality and the nature of being a split fragment of this infinite wave function of potential that we call God, and expressing it through the distortion that is you. And when you can really understand this framework from this perspective, it allows you to be able to kind of zoom out to any density of understanding to apply it to any situation or catalyst or event that happens to you. And what I'm talking about in regards to the law of one is kind of like the 7th or 8th density understanding of like, well, the grand order of things. But you can there's much more to it that you can kind of apply 6, 5, 4, 3 all the way down, and really just kind of use this framework to understand the events that occur in your life and your relationships to other people, and your relationship with being able to tap into this intelligent infinity that surrounds us as the backdrop of creation at all times. And all of these things are just very important to me. And like I said, I kind of kept all of this framework to myself for years, and felt like it wasn't my place to share it. Felt like the people who seek it will find it, and all that kind of stuff. But like I said, I think I'm ready, and I know I'm ready and willing to share now, and people are more and more willing to hear it, and so yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm gonna share.
I dig it. But the only problem I have with that is if there's no objective reality, how are we supposed to sell all these pharmaceuticals and claim science behind them?
It's a good point, man. We're not. There has to be one.
Talking about my big pharma,
It's
man.
a head scratcher right there.
Yeah.
I feel you, man. I feel you. In fact, the chat was lighting up with what you were saying. Basically, spot on.
Oh, wow.
Spot on.
And check out Law of One if anybody hasn't. It was a big chunk of time. There's a website, I forget, I think it was like LL Research, where they did do some condensed, and like I read the whole thing, but then there's one site that was helping to do sort of searching specific words, because it is really like learning a new language in a lot of ways. There's a lot of vocabulary and density and these certain concepts. And I remember talking to my granddad about it, who has a Western sort of science background, but it was fascinating kind of just trying to get him to understand the basic concept of everything being consciousness, and then it just being densities or levels of consciousness, frequency, vibration, as Tesla really described it. But just trying to, it's, basically I'm a panpsychist, or, the school of that, where I think it's all conscious, but there's levels to it. But we have such ingrained programming to think everything is material. And it's almost like sometimes unless you have something powerful enough as a catalyst, especially if you're older and lived more and have more neuroplastic programming, unless you have something as powerful as like an ayahuasca or ibogaine or DMT, it's very difficult for people to break that programming of just the materialism of like, no, I see it, I feel it, so it's material. I don't understand what you're saying. Even with quantum physics and the things now proving to us without a doubt that no, it's mostly empty space. I think it's hard to ground that for people.
I think that right there shows you that we're hardwired for story and not fact.
That's exactly correct. Like quantum physics demonstrates it's not only that things are mostly empty space, but that wave functions exist as a sea. Like we're swimming in a sea of these potentials, of this energy that's built of infinite potential, and that infinite potential, that backdrop of intelligent infinity, is the everything nothingness that a lot of like Eastern mystic cultures discuss, like the concept of like Ein Sof and Brahma and Atman and stuff like that. Like it's literally just like a wave of potential waiting to be collapsed by an observer's expectations and beliefs, and that's what happens all the fucking time. And somehow the mystery to me is there's still this seeming consensus of reality. So that's like part of the mystery. Well, like that's what's happening, and this is everything we can observe. Like there's still data that seems to be objective, but at the ultimate basis of reality is that like I'm still painting meaning onto every single piece of this data at all times, or else it has none.
Whether we know it or not,
no meaning, just is. Right.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's where it's happening whether we agree to it or not. I mean, this is autonomic. This is universally autonomic.
Yeah, so exactly.
And I think
exactly. Yeah.
I think to me that's almost a fail-safe. Is like I've heard a lot of people say I feel like many people in the world are NPCs, and in a way I could totally see how it would seem that way, because if there weren't to be people clinging to a consensus reality, it would start getting exciting very quickly. Because I mean, imagine if you could just start thinking shit out of existence. That could get
especially right now.
Super,
oh God.
And I think the amount of belief that holds what we call consensus reality and what other people call objective reality, I think that's part of a fail-safe, and I don't know what happens. I really don't. I think that part of waking up is acknowledging that everything that's been happening to you in your life actually is more under your control than you realize, but your subconscious isn't going to let you just have the keys to that kingdom fully.
Yeah.
And
we're not ready for it.
I'd be very curious to see, like, when people start waking up to the fact that we're far closer to immature magicians that don't realize we're creating our own lives.
I love that. I love that.
You know, and like, what happens when, you know, like, if we start waking up to that? But, you know, like, I'm not even worried about it. Like, what if we start waking up to it? Well, you can wake up to it intellectually. That doesn't mean you're actually driving it with the force and effect of your belief at the base of your spine. When you believe it top to bottom, those are the real wizards and the real magicians. And I believe there are a few. I don't believe that they're all human, but I believe some of them are human. And I believe that, you know, what altruism is looks different on that scale than it does for most people who are still being driven by their, like, base desires, and they don't realize that their tiny wants are getting in the ways of them actually driving the, you know, the most complex, I don't even know what you would call this, like, you know, incredible, you know, magic instrument. And so, yeah,
it's changing. I mean, there's momentum.
What I want to say about it, I think we're definitely magicians, albeit very mature, and I think probably by the grace of whatever, you know, God or divinity we have working for us, is that some people, actually the majority of people, are holding consensus reality together, while the rest of us are really working through the shit we need to work through before. What was that movie, The Sphere, where they found that sphere at the bottom of the ocean? It was like Dustin Hoffman, Samuel Jackson was in it, Queen Latifah.
That sounds right.
They found this sphere at the bottom of the ocean. They didn't know what it was. They were like, is this alien? Is it from the future? And it turns out, like, it will manifest. They didn't know what it was. They were like, is your deepest desires, regardless if it's like a nightmare or a dream, it will just manifest it, but instantaneously. And towards the end, I don't think exactly you know, where humanity's at, but it's close. They decide to manifest it, or to will it to leave Earth, because we couldn't handle it. Like, at this stage of our evolution, we couldn't handle being able to manifest reality instantaneously.
Yeah, damn, I'm gonna watch that movie. That sounds dope.
Oh, do it.
Yeah, I would also equally love to be able to will something away. I live down here in the South, and it's May, and if I could think something away, I would fucking eradicate every mosquito in existence, dude, immediately. That'd be my one wish.
That's they're here in Nashville. But
again,
it's not much better here in Nashville, but I feel you.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, man, that's the you know, that's that kind of tapping into the subconscious mind. And like, I really do believe that our unconscious minds are the unicity and like the biological internet that unites all living things. And that when you can really cross that veil, that's when magic happens. Magic with a K, as it's spoken of and written about, really is simply the conscious control of the subconscious mind. That's really all it is. And like, your subconscious mind is driving your ship at all times. So when you can modulate its operating system, which you can do in these deep psychedelic spaces, you know, you can do through deep meditative practices, whatever. It's like you can change the way that your ship is being driven in a way that consciously you won't even know. But like, it will be expressed through you, the changes and edits that you make. It's such a strange thing, that veil between these kind of two levels of our mind.
Yeah, dude, rapid fire. Before we let you go, we had Maria Love Photography asking in the chat, can your music creations also induce a state that is similar to the ayahuasca experience?
Well, that was the purpose of, if anybody in chat has seen my Solstice album, full album mix collaboration with Taz
Wow, pretty wild.
Whole thing surrounding HemiSync, I'm assuming he's referencing, called the gateway process. I have all 6 waves, they call them. It's really interesting, like technology that was written about and utilized by the CIA, and like based around HemiSync. And they sell this program now, but I have them all in my Google Drive, and they're really, really interesting. But yeah, HemiSync is essentially was the discovery of binaural beats, and the fact that they have an effect on our brainwave state directly just through the acoustics of them. And I mean, to circle back, when you were asking me if I put stuff in my music, I put theta binaural waves in the background of many of my tracks, very low volume. And what that does is it just is designed to entrance your brain into theta wave state, like as much as possible, right? And in the area as possible. So and you know, theta brainwaves are conducive to like trance states, like shamanic drumming, all kinds of stuff is you know, designed to induce this brainwave state, or does it, whether or not they know it. And yeah, so but yeah, HemiSync is a crazy thing.
It is.
It was kind of the pioneering of it.
I actually have that document right behind me. I know they were speaking of the Monroe Institute towards the beginning of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Monroe Institute.
80s? That was like early 80s. That was
Robert Monroe. He was a pioneer of binaural.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's incredible.
Yeah. There's so you're talking about the CIA document?
Yeah.
The gateway process?
Well, this was
what is it, page
of the Army.
Yeah.
Dude, it's either page 25, 26, or 27 is missing. Look at the document. One of those pages, the whole page is missing, and it's like right when they start talking about God. It's wild, dude.
Somebody tore it out.
It's like this whole there's this whole subreddit dedicated to like trying to find what was on the missing page of that document.
No shit. That's wild. Yo, dude, in the interest of time, is there anything exciting that's coming up? I know I kind of asked you this, but is there anything exciting coming up, even if it's like shows that people might be able to connect with, but anything you want people to know about that they can connect deeper with your stuff might be able to connect with?
Yeah, I mean, I'm playing a couple festivals this festival season. The one coming up quickest is Arcadia Fest in Wyoming, alongside Glitch Mob, Troy Boy, Desert Dwellers, Yaima. Really cool lineup. Obviously, this festival is being put together by Aubrey Marcus and Fit for Service and those cats, and I think they're going to curate something really cool. And I'm working on a bunch of music. I finally have some more music ready for release. It was pushed back a little bit on the schedule, but I have some music releasing late this summer. Music ready for release. I'm working with back a little bit on the schedule. People who have been really wanting to work with for a long time. And yeah, that's cooking right now as well. Some remixes I'm doing and some collaborations with other people. And you know, yeah, I mean, I'm one of those people that like I don't release music unless it's like up to my standards and quality, and I feel like imbues the intention that I was trying to put into it. So I don't like release music every month or every week like some people do. So sometimes it's a long time in between releases, but I make sure to make them count like fully, and I curate audio visual experiences when I can for YouTube and everything like that. So but yeah, just working on a lot of music and working on developing that kind of educational platform that I was talking about, and where am I right now?
Right on. Well, I know we just showed your website. Gordo will have all that info in the show notes, correct?
Oh, cool. Okay. Yeah. If y'all want to jam this kind of whole vibe, the ancient future vibe, I have an ancient future playlist that I curate on Spotify. That is on my website. That's the top thing. You go to savagemusic.com, or you can find it through my Spotify. That is on my website. That's the top thing. You go to savagemusic.com. A lot of my friends, music producers, and just really amazing music that you can honestly vibe out to any time of any day.
Amazing. Dude, I'm digging all the artwork that's associated with what you're doing as well, man. It's
thank you. Thank you.
Well, my man, this has been great. I appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah,
totally.
Yeah, dude. I'm excited to hear what you come up with next out of Maestro Orlando's Icaros. That's going to be excellent. And for everybody else, ladies and gentlemen, that was Savej, aka Donnie. He's somebody that I definitely plan on spending some more time with and really getting to know quite a bit more, not just musically. A lot of very incredible things coming out of him, and really was thoroughly surprised. I'm sure you, having heard him, get to see like the depth of his research as well. Not just somebody who's into psychedelics and making music, probably one of the deeper researchers, independent researchers on psychedelics, and not just in a heady way, actually experiencing, going deep, finding linkages that I haven't heard anybody else talking about before. So that's pretty rad. And that's near and dear to my heart. That's right on brand here for the Ben Stewart Podcast. So with that being said, I'm always going to have people that bring it to you like Donnie did today. You know, what I loved about it is you can tell that this is directly from his experience as well. And that's what we try to do here. A lot of what we're talking about, we can riff on the science all day, and there's a lot of it. But the thing that I like the most is when we can like not talk down to the listeners, but really crouch down with the listeners, get low to the ground, and explain like, listen, this is where the real experience happens too. You're going to want to feel it. And when you do feel it, then we won't need to use our words anyway. We'll, you know, the only thing to do then is to celebrate and dance. So please go check out music by Savej. It's on Spotify. We just showed you. Check out his entire playlist, everything he's curated, and do me a favor. You can lay around and listen to it. You can listen to it with some headphones, but put it on a nice sound system and dance around. And if you can get your feet on the bare earth, I'm telling you, there's some kind of synergy here that is unparalleled. I've done it many times. I've done it with my family. My 3-year-old boys love it. My 6-year-old daughter loves it, and we love doing it together. So there's got to be some synergy there that you and your family and your loved ones would love as well. With that being said, every single Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern, we are here on the Ben Stewart Podcast. Every Monday, I'm doing my Waking Infinity News. Tuesday, I have stuff at Ben Joseph Stewart behind the paywall. Get involved with all of it because it's all for you. With that being said, I love you all, and I'll catch you all next time on the Ben Stewart Podcast.